So we should start by arousing the right attitude in hearing these teachings, and in specifically to arouse bodhicitta, both in the aspiration aspect and in the engaging aspect, by thinking, counseling yourself in this way that all sentient beings must become free of suffering. And I will liberate all beings from their suffering and establish them on the path to awakening, to their awakening. And in order to do that, in order to liberate beings, then I will practice the Dharma by listening to the teachings and contemplating the teachings and in practicing the teachings, and by bringing to perfection the paramitas, the transcendent conduct of the bodhisattva. So this kind of mindset, this kind of attitude we should arouse now. I and you, both of us, we should have this kind of attitude as we engage in this practice of studying Shantideva's text. So we have already covered the teachings of the first chapter of the Bodhicharyavatara, which talks of the benefits. And the purpose of that chapter is to remind us, or to create an interest in us in bodhicitta, and remind us of the importance of bodhicitta, the excellence of bodhicitta. And the more we become attuned to those teachings in this first chapter, then the less of our effort, our mental effort, is distracted by, how do we say a lesser purpose, lesser goals. But the more we appreciate the excellence of bodhicitta and the benefits of bodhicitta, the more we will create an instinct for only relating to our life with bodhicitta as its goal. So this first chapter we should really read and contemplate that and turn it into a practice of meditation as often as we can. Then the second chapter begins the practice of purifying our mind and creating virtue, or creating the merit, both of which are required, or both of which create the mind that bodhicitta can arise within. And so the second chapter begins with the practice of making offerings. We can say, because this is Shantideva's, he uses the first person, I make this, I do this, but we should also think I. And use how Shantideva practiced, use that as the way we should practice. That's the idea here. It's not that we're studying how Shantideva practiced as a historical, out of historical interest, but he is, like we say, like in the 7-line prayer, as I practice following in your footsteps, I pray to you confer your blessings. So to receive the blessings of a bodhisattva such as Shantideva, then we practice like Shantideva. And then the second portion of this chapter is the 4 strengths of confession. Shantideva here shows us how to purify our mind, how to distance ourselves from our negative habits through the 4 strengths. The strength of regret is what looks like that's what we have been, what we've been covering up to now, which takes us to the 45th verse of the second chapter. And when he talks here about, just to recap a little bit, when he talks of all the, there I'll be prostrate upon my bed and all around my family and friends, but I alone shall be the one to feel the cutting of the thread of life. And when hardly guessed at horrors such as this, and all these examples of how a person feels when they're basically captured by the authorities, in chapter 40, verse 43, and then in verse 44, how we're captured by our karmic projections at the time of death, when our mind and body actually sever and separate, and our karma begins to project our experience, and we lose our willpower, we lose our ability to control things. And who can give me safe protection from this horror, from this frightful dread? These verses here, we should practice that. We should use those as material to practice regularly. Like I mentioned, I think last time, how Chakra Rinpoche he told us always to meditate on these kinds of scenarios of your death, not just yourself through emotionally and mentally in different scenarios, as Shantideva is Okay, we lost our connection. So we should enact something like, who can give me safe protection from this horror, from this frightful dread? And then I'll search the four directions, seeking help with panic-stricken eyes. As I mentioned, and as the commentary says, what we are telling ourselves is that we haven't practiced in such a way that we'll feel in control when we pass away from this life and when we die, that we'll have the regret of knowing that we had this precious human birth and that we had encountered the teachers who taught the Dharma and treated us kindly with their blessings and their teachings, but we were always distracted by other things.
Yep.
And didn't purify our mind and gather the merit through practice.
Yep.
And so then, and we are basically beyond being saved by the Buddha, because we don't think of the Buddha at that time. So this is what the practice, how we should practice. And then to continue, then it says, but in those four directions no protection shall I find, and I shall sink into despairing woe. No refuge will there be for me. At such a time, what shall I do? So basically, he's experiencing how he reflects at the point of death, how he squandered his life in wrong actions, and that except for Dharma and virtue, there's nothing else will help us at the time of death. And so he's admonishing himself, what shall I do? Because at that point, that's when we should have become accustomed to taking refuge. As he says then in the following verse, 47, thus, from this day forward, I take refuge in the Buddhas, guardians of beings who labor to protect all wanderers, those mighty ones who scatter every fear. So then we should contemplate the qualities of the Buddha, the power of the Buddha, the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha as a source of refuge. And here begins the second strength of purification that separates us from our negative actions, our karma, purifies our karma, which is the strength of the support or the reliance. And so then the Buddha here in the verse 47 is our source of support in this case, our support of our confession. And we should think of and whenever we think of the Buddha, we should take refuge. If we think to take refuge, like it says, if we think to take refuge in the morning, then we should take refuge right then. If we think about the Dharma in the afternoon, we should take refuge and take refuge in the three jewels in the afternoon. If we think about Dharma in the evening, then we should take refuge in the Dharma in the evening, right then and there, not going on about. I know it becomes a habit for people to say, well, I should practice, but I can't. That sentence, we shouldn't finish that sentence. We should, as soon as we think to practice Dharma, we should practice it right then and there, and not talk ourselves out of it. Then further, then on verse 48, and in the Dharma they have realized in their hearts, which drives away the terrors of samsara. So Dharma is the protection that drives away the suffering of samsara by practicing it, only by practicing it. And that is there's the Dharma of, what's referred to here is the Dharma of transmission and the Dharma of realization. In other words, the Dharma of transition means the teachings that emanate, that originate from the Buddha. And through studying the Dharma of transmission, we can basically know the meaning of a noble mind, a noble mindset. That is, taking refuge in the Dharma of transmission is to learn and begin to know the meaning of a noble mindset. And the Dharma of realization is to actually give birth to a noble mind. And of course that begins by taking refuge, by trusting, by relying on the Dharma, and by putting it into practice as much as you can according to your capacity. And we must take it up as a practice immediately, like right now. And in the hosts of the Bodhisattvas, those who have the noble mind, the noble mindset, are the Bodhisattvas, those who are have that noble mindset and act as our companions and our inspiration and source of blessings. And so in them, likewise, I will perfectly take refuge. Perfectly take refuge, meaning without hesitation, straight away, straightforward. And then verse 49 says, gripped by dread, beside myself with anguish. We should cry out at this, like when we are confessing, when we're using the power of regret, and then using the strength of regret and remorse, and then shifting to using the strength, practicing the strength of reliance or of refuge. Then, as it says here, gripped by dread, beside myself with anguish. It's always taught how we really need to be worried, fearful of our karma. Otherwise, you're just, like it says, otherwise, if you just go through lip service of taking refuge in this way, using the strength of reliance, you're just being deceitful. Because really, you're not that worried. You're trusting that you're trusting your karma, which is a completely unreliable source of security. So we, like it says here, we must cry out in fear to the sources of refuge. Here it says, gripped by dread, beside myself with anguish, to Samanta Bhadra I will give myself. My body I myself will give to Manjughosha, gentle and melodious. So here now these are the Bodhisattvas, Samantabhadra, who is considered kind of the elder Bodhisattva, so to speak, one of the early Bodhisattvas of this era, and Manjughosha. Manjughosha, these next three or four or so verses are introducing the bodhisattvas, what are called the close heart sons, heart heirs, or heart offsprings of the Buddha. There's the 8 bodhisattvas. They are for us the principal bodhisattvas. And they personify the qualities of the Buddhas. Like Samantabhadra personifies the qualities of aspiration, of all the Buddha's aspirations. And Manjughosha, or Manjushri, is the personification of Buddha's wisdom. And to him whose deeds of mercy never fail, my Lord Avalokita, I cry out from depths of misery, protect me now, an evildoer. Here is Avalokita, or Avalokiteshvara, who personifies all the compassion of the Buddhas. And to the noble one, Akashagarbha, and to Kshitagarbha from my heart I call. So Akashagarbha, Namkai Nyingbo, is the personification of the blessings of all the Buddhas, and Kshitagarbha personifies the merit of all the Buddhas. And to all protectors great, compassionate, I cried to them in search of refuge. From to Vajrapani I shall fly, for in the sight of him all vengeful things like Yama's hosts escape in terror to the 4 directions. Here then Vajrapani as the embodiment of all the power of Buddha. I say from the time that the Buddha first gave rise to bodhicitta, then Vajrapani appeared and became his protector through all the lifetimes, through all the kalpas of Buddhas, or the bodhisattvas' austerities and practice of the conduct of the paramitas. Then Vajrapani was always there to protect. And that's how it will be for all the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate kalpa, this fortunate era. You know, this is the era of it's called the fortunate era in the degenerate age, because there will appear 1,000 Buddhas. And our Buddha of our time, Buddha Shakyamuni, is the 4th Buddha. And all these Buddhas are like you and me, just ordinary people. And they give rise to bodhicitta. And through their sympathy and compassion for sentient beings, they take on the responsibilities to free them from suffering, which can only genuinely occur when they become enlightened. And so in order to lead beings to enlightenment, the Bodhisattva takes the responsibility by pledging to basically conduct each and every sentient being to their enlightenment. And so Vajrapani stays with each training Bodhisattva until they're enlightened. I said this is, sometimes we see there's 1,002 Buddhas, not actually 1,000, there's 1,002 Buddhas means there's 1,000 Buddhas and Vajrapani, and then Brahma, who always also accompanies the Buddha. And the Brahma is kind of his function is to request the Buddha to teach when they attain enlightenment. So there's always these two. We say 1,002 Buddhas really means 1,000 Buddhas and these two Bodhisattvas. And there's one, that's 7 is there. They didn't, Shantideva didn't mention Nirvana Vishkambhan, who was the Bodhisattva that epitomizes or embodies or personifies all the qualities of the Buddha, and particularly Kshitigarbha and Akashagarbha are important to rely on. Kshitigarbha particularly can be relied on for those who have undertaken the discipline of the Vinaya and have breached their vows or their vows, any one of the vows of the ordained people, men and women. Kshitigarbha becomes a kind of a support, a strength of support for purifying. And Akashagarbha, when he was one of his powerful aspirations as a bodhisattva is to guard and protect beginner bodhisattvas. So these two bodhisattvas we should develop a kind of relationship with, because they both are good for beginners like us and support our bodhicitta precepts and commitments. Basically, if you are a Vajrayana practitioner, you should have and recognize your meditational deity, your yidam, and pray to your yidam. Get used to praying to the bodhisattvas or your meditational deity as the embodiment of the 3 jewels, as the embodiment of the 3 roots, as the expression of the 3 kayas of your own nature, your own mind's nature, so that your meditational practice is to develop a relationship and a power and develop a power with the sources of refuge, including specifically your yidam. Formerly your words I have transgressed, but having seen these terrors all around, I come to you for refuge, praying, swiftly drive away my fear. So again, Shantideva's saying, I'm confessing how I have transgressed what I was taught, that I learned, I was given teachings from teachers, from the Dharma, and I didn't pay attention. I made my own decisions elsewhere. And so I'm confessing that now because I see that I am in the throes of death and have no power, and my friends and all my stuff is irrelevant, and it's all, now it becomes meaningless. And I'm experiencing the uncertainty and fragmentation of the dying process. And I am looking into the face of the intermediate state, the bardo, with all its uncertainty and panic. And I'm looking forward to the results of my negative actions, all my aggression, all my clinging and attachment, all my pride and jealousy and doubt and envy. All these are now going to manifest as my next life experienced in the lower realms, when all those causes, my kleshas, my affliction, my mental afflictions, begin to project the karma of my future. And so I remember my Lama, I remember my Yidam, I remember the Buddhas, I remember the Bodhisattvas, and I pray to you, purify my karma, protect me. And so it says we should rely at that time and practice now. This isn't like this is something to practice now, not something to tuck away until that time, because there's no place to tuck away this. You have to become used to it. You have to gain familiarity with it so that it comes to your mind. So it says we should learn to rely on the strength of the three of refuge, just like a person who's fallen down relies on, how to say, we rely on pushing against the earth to stand up. That's how we should rely on the three jewels. So we need to get used to that. For if I'm alarmed by common ailments, okay, now he's talking about the strength, the strength of the antidote, or the strength of the remedial practice. So we have the strength of regret, the strength of the refuge, or the strength of reliance, and now the strength of the remedial practice. And he's using an example here of, if alarmed by common ailments, I must implement the doctor's word. What need to speak of when I'm constantly brought low by ills like lust and faults 100-fold? So if we panic, as we, if we panic enough to, if we get worried about our health, our physical health, and we seek a remedy, and we use that remedy, we take those pills, or we take things even such as very invasive things like, yes, cut me open, with a knife. We accept that. Help me remove my ailment. Or we drink or take like chemo and these intensely noxious medicines out of fear of death from a disease. So if we do that, then it's actually our kleshas that are more destructive. It's our kleshas that throw us into the realms of suffering. They're more harmful than physical disease. We should think that way. This body will die, and the cause of that death is birth. All the diseases and the ailments and all the ups and downs of health are just our sort of ordinary playing out of a life. But the real cause of death is birth. So there's no cure for that. This body is destined to die as soon as it's born. And we take a reasonable, well-informed path to maintain the health and strength of this body while we have it. And that's a responsibility we have as Dharma practitioners, because as long as our mind is renting this body, then we have the opportunity to develop bodhicitta. We have the ability to discover and perfect what is meaningful in that lifetime. But it is the kleshas that will persist. And so we need to confess and purify those kleshas now while we are sort of paying rent in this body. And if by one of these alone, that is to say, kleshas, even if one of these kleshas, like lust, attachment, aggression, hatred, if by one of these alone the dwellers in the world are all thrown down, in other words, are catapulted and projected or shot or catapulted into the lower realms, and if no other remedy exists, no other healing elsewhere to be found than words of the all-knowing doctor, which uproot our every ill, that is to say, the Buddha, and most significantly, the Buddha's teachings. The thought to turn on him deaf ears is abject and contemptible stupidity. This is Shantideva is saying this. If we examine all the options that we have, there's no method that is superior to the Dharma to cure mental and physical afflictions. The source of all mental, emotional, and physical afflictions are the poisons of the mind. Attachment, aversion, and ignorance being the principal, the root poisons of the mind. And so to ignore practicing the Dharma, to ignore, in this case, purifying karma, to ignore karma, to not persist or not to persevere in deepening and broadening our understanding of karma, our faith in karma, our conviction in karma, and our conviction in the impermanent nature of everything. By understanding karma and intentionally studying and contemplating and meditating on karma and impermanence, then our mind will naturally be drawn towards virtue. There'll be a natural virtue that arises. And if we apply that natural virtue, if we, if we create a context for that virtue to express itself by using pure motivation at the outset of a virtue, if we engage in virtue with an undistracted mind, and if we dedicate the results of that virtue to the enlightenment of all beings, then our karma will be purified. Our kleshas will be purified. The roots of our negativity will be purified. That is called the strength of the applied remedy, or of applying the remedy. And if we don't know how to die, then we need to purify our karma. We need to practice these strengths. Okay, where are we? The thought to turn on him deaf ears is abject and contemptible stupidity. Well, and it says in the commentary, if we, at that point, when we, from our own point of view, we'll look like an idiot if we haven't used these things. That's we'll just feel like an ignorant. We're so ignorant ourselves. But no, as I say, no pounding of your chest is going to matter at that point. And to the bodhisattvas, you just become an object of pity. So we don't want to, if we don't want to be that object of pity to the Buddhas and bodhisattvas, or shameful and kind of a ignoramus to ourselves when we die, then we need to engage in the methods to purify our karma, to purify our kleshas and karma. And this is Mahayana, and basically any virtue can be a remedy to the kleshas and karma. If it's done with the wish and intention to break negative habits. If I'm going to do this virtue to break this negative, to break the negative habit of greed, then I'm going to practice virtue. I'm going to practice generosity with the intention. Why am I'm practicing this? I'm practicing this generosity to break and distance myself from my habit of clinging. to impermanent things. And if we do that as an intention, then there's some purification. And in the process of the act itself, if we maintain an attitude of confession of misdeeds as we enact something, as we enact the virtue, then that's a contributory factor to the uprooting of the kleshas and the karma. And if we dedicate the merit of confession to the purification of your own negative actions, if it's something specific, or just everything that's arisen out of all the karma, the negative karma that's arisen out of the kleshas, if you dedicate the merit to the purification of that, and then shower that whole, this threefold way of practicing, if you shower that with compassion, then definitely then your karma will be purified. Along a small and ordinary cliff, if I must pick my way with special care, what need to speak of that long-lasting chasm plunging to the depths of 1,000 leagues? I don't know what a league is. But basically, this is just talking about being thrust into the lower realms for a long time. You know, it's very hard, even when we can just use our own experience of becoming enraged, and how long we can get stuck in that. You know? And so purifying karma and accumulating merit, especially the merit, when we accumulate merit, then our ability to transform or sidestep being storm, like klesha storms. You know, if we can avoid or sidestep or sort of embrace and transform, or just stare and see right through to the truth of the empty nature of our emotions, like that all hinges on our merit. And the purification is what creates the distance or the space to be able to process in a constructive way, in a meaningful way, our kleshas when they do rise. And they will, even for bodhisattvas. You know. So we need to act with care. Like going along a cliff, we be careful because we're aware of the fall off thing, the space. You know, what do you call that? You know, an ordinary cliff, precipice. We don't just nonchalantly walk along. It's tricky. A stone, twist our ankle. You know, many people don't come back from hikes, you know, in the hills. They go off for a good time and they don't come back. We know that. So if we have to do that along that, how about, you know, samsara, the lower realms of samsara? So we need to be, this verse 57 is basically saying we need to conduct ourselves and act carefully, not, and you know, be wary of the emergence of hatred or aggression or clinging or lust, or even depression or ignorance or some form on the dark side, to be aware of those things, be careful of those things. In the fourth chapter, that's expanded on quite a bit there, how to practice being careful. But here, the message is to understand, when we think about practicing the Dharma and purifying karma, first we have to understand, like in the Four Noble Truths, first is to understand the truth of suffering, and then to overcome the truth of the origin of suffering, and then to aim for the truth of the cessation of suffering, and apply the truth of the path. And applying the truth of the path, particularly here, means apply it to your mind. Then the Dharma will protect us. When we say Chopalame Domchu Rinpoche, we mean as unsurpassable protection is the precious sacred Dharma. And as the Buddha, when he was passing away into the Buddha's parinirvana, he also said, I can't, it's in the context here, he was saying, I can't save you. I've taught you the Dharma. That's what's going to save you, and you have to practice it. It won't save you, just like a medicine. A doctor, a great wise doctor that you have utter respect for and paid a lot of money for his consultation, and he gives you a prescription and you go fill the prescription. That's not going to save you. It will only save you if you actually take it and follow whatever regimen goes along with it. You can't put it on a special shelf with a picture of the doctor, the greatest heart doctor in the world, you know, Dr. DeBakey, you put a picture of him there, and then a vial of your, you know, your little orange container of your unbelievably powerful medication that's going to cure all your ailments. And every day you walk by it and say, oh, my doctor is so great, his medicine is so amazing. You know, that's what's called abject and contemptible stupidity. You know, refer back to verse 56. So that's the point, anyway. There's a lot of, you know, so this is how we should sit down, read this, and then be that, do that, be that stupid person. You know, and then take refuge, then change in your practice. Take refuge. That's your motivation. That's how you should take refuge. It's not just going and taking refuge with some preceptor and then just idly starting out your practice with refuge. But that's how you take refuge. You know. So here we practice just that part of what might be an extensive practice. Or like in our 7-branch prayer, it's the first section is the practice of taking refuge. And so then 58, here, this is, today at least I shall not die. We're so rash to lull myself with words like these. My disillusion in my hour of death will come to me. Of this there is no doubt. And it will come to me, it will definitely come at an indefinite time. So there's two things we need to, and this we've already, I think, gone over this, but it always pays to repeat it. Death is certain. So we need to uproot maybe there's something in our helix, what do you call it, our DNA that that's something that it's some life-preserving thing that always keeps a little space of, you don't have to die if you're extra careful, you know. There's always, so we have to really convert all those pockets of our mind that's holding out, believing in the certainty of our death. That's why the teachers have taught impermanence and the certainty of death again and again and again. It's a deep thing. It's not just a piece of information that we subscribe to as a Buddhist. And on the other hand, all that certainty of death is also empowered further by the uncertainty of the time, because we can always come up with, I am certain that I'm going to die later. That's always the what do you call it? The kicker. That's always our cop-out, sort of, yes, I know I'm going to die. Yes, Rinpoche, I know I'm going to die later. You know, so that's, you know, too rash to lull myself with words like these. So we can't be nonchalant or carefree. And it's not just old people who die. Babies die. 1-day-old babies die. 2-day babies die. 5-day-old babies die. 5-year-olds die. 10-year-olds die. 20-year-olds die. 30-year-olds die. 40-year-olds die. 50-year-olds die. 60-year-olds die. So that there's no fixed time of a life. It's uncertain. So contemplate that so that you get worried. Then take refuge. It's not that Buddhists aren't supposed to walk around freaked out and worried all the time. That we're talking about peace, bliss, wisdom, compassion, loving kindness, joy. Those are the qualities that come about through this process of deepening and expanding our understanding of causation, impermanence, and all those factors that go into the path of awakening. Who can give me fearlessness? What sure escape is there from this? It's certain that I'm going to die, so how can I relax my mind at ease? You know, so here I think I mentioned before, who do we know that we can call that's going to tell us that, oh yeah, it's Wednesday night, you're not going to die tonight, so you can make whatever plan you want for Thursday because I guarantee that you'll be there. We can't say, we don't know that, and nobody else knows that. Who can give me fearlessness? Who can assure us that we won't die today? Like you look at this body and the breath, our breath, it's almost like nothing, this breath. When you look at the space at night or in the daytime, the blue sky and how distance, how you look out distance over the water and things, there's a lot of space there. And we just breathe in a little bit of, I don't know, like what, a pint or something less than a pint of air. And then it goes right out again. That's nothing. And then our heart is beating. Like, why is it doing that? It's like perplexing. How can it just keep doing that? It's going to stop at some point. Why doesn't it just stop right now? There's no reason why it wouldn't just stop right now. So this is like this is Nagarjuna is thinking that we don't know whether whether tomorrow we'll wake up from our sleep or we'll be born in another realm. We'll die at night. I don't know what the mortality statistics are for people who die in the night. I don't know how we find out in the world, but a lot of people die at night, in sleep. And if your dreams are anything like my dreams, you don't want to die in the middle of one of my dreams. So you want to have a little bit more control and the ability to take refuge and so forth. So how can I relax my mind at ease? It's for practitioners. The point isn't not to be afraid of death. I mean, we're kind of, I'm kind of contradicting myself here, but because we do want to, the point is not to become fearful of death. The point is to appreciate death so that we're fearful of the lack of sufficient time before we die. That's our fear, is really for lack of time before we die. Of life's experience, all seasons past, what's left to me, what now remains. By clinging to what now is here no more, my teacher's precepts I've disobeyed. So this is a teaching here. This has to do here with sense objects, sense organs, like light as a sense object, light that creates a vision, and then the eye as an organ, and then the consciousness that comes, and how our desire draws us to experience bliss, happiness, and that happiness lasts for one moment and then it ends. This is a Abhidharma discussion of our experience. Our experience is momentary. Sometimes that bliss might be followed by a second, unique, disconnected moment of bliss. And so we feel as though we've had a longer moment of bliss, but in the course of 2 moments of bliss, we've experienced the loss of the first moment of bliss, and then the arising of the second moment of bliss. I don't know if this is me. And that's how our experience plays itself out. We're always going through a process of momentary moments of happiness with the disappointment or the aversion that's produced at the end of a moment of happiness, whether or not another moment of happiness arises, of course, based on our karma and based on, that is to say, our former actions, previous actions, and the strength of those actions. Like the happiness that we experience is not a sort of monolithic chunk of time plus experience. It is the occurrence of moments that have a beginning, a duration, and an end. And they always have a beginning, a duration, and an end, even a nanosecond. And so we're always experiencing bliss and pain of loss of bliss, even as we are experiencing what might be the illusion of a continual thread of happiness. And so we have this accumulation of habits, of habitual tendencies based on these, on this sensory experience that we've had. And at the end, it will always be the, how do I say? Therefore, pleasure will always come to an end. And in the process of, say, clinging to that pleasure, in the face of its momentary ending, we create more negative karma because we're clinging. And it could very well be that our happiness that we're experiencing was caused by a selfless act. And we're experiencing the results of that selfless act. But yet we are trying to sustain or perpetuate that happiness in the face of its decline by clinging to it, which is a negative motivation, selfish motivation. So this kind of falls under the category of the shortcomings of samsara. The bliss of enlightenment is not based on causation. It's the nature of our mind as a felt experience to be blissful and compassionate and omniscient or knowing. There's a knowing quality, a radiance, which is its knowing quality. So this process of our consciousnesses experiencing objects through sense organs has no basis, has no fundamental basis. Or we could say there's no abiding core to that experience. There's only habit. There's only, we could say, there's no addict. There's only addiction. So our Dharma practice is to cut craving for sense objects. Not objects, craving. Craving sort of precedes clinging. And craving and clinging as a duet, or as a team, are the fundamental cause of suffering, the second noble truth. And so of life's experience, all seasons past life, we've been doing this. Basically, we could say, in conventional terms, we've been doing this forever. It's not that we were enlightened at one time and then we fell away from our enlightened state and began this whole samsaric circling in samsara. That is not the Buddhist view. We have not, if we were enlightened, then we would still be enlightened. So everything is impermanent, even on this subtle nanosecond to nanosecond level. but our clinging is our character almost. So our Dharma practice has to address that. That's the target of our Dharma practice, of our purification, of our accumulation of merit, of our virtue, of our compassion or ordinary compassion and so forth, of our relative bodhicitta, aspiration bodhicitta, and conduct bodhicitta. So that if we cut our craving and our clinging, then the effect of our actions won't be experienced. Bodhisattvas act, high advanced bodhisattvas, those on the real noble levels of the path, they act, but they don't act with clinging and craving and clinging. So they do not experience the results of their actions. So the message of this 60th verse is to take on the responsibility of Dharma by understanding that we must cut craving and clinging. Okay, the 61st verse. When this life is left behind, it's like Rinpoche, go back to the previous one. Rinpoche always talked about how like a scroll, a roll of paper, like if a roll of paper has been rolled up and then even stuck into a tube, that's the way our mind is conditioned, and it's like a habit. Even when we spread it out, as soon as we take our hands off of it, it goes back to its habit and rolls up again. So Dharma practice is, again, unroll it. Again, it goes, not to be patient, to be persistent, unroll it. Eventually, then through skillful means, then we get into Mahayana, Vajrayana. How about turning it over and rolling it the other way to antidote that habit, or tacking it down, blowing steam over it, doing, all these methods that are simply the antidoting of habitual tendencies that lie beneath, I don't know, subconscious, it's all subconscious, but that lie beneath the poisons of the mind. Even when we give up the poisons of the mind, we still have certain habitual tendencies. Like giving up a habit like smoking. There's still a possibility because of deep habitual tendencies there. And when this life is left behind with all my kith and kin, I must set out on a strange path all alone. Strange path all alone. We don't know what it's like. Well, maybe we do. To not have power or self-determination, especially modernists, modern people. It's all about. We've achieved self-determination, for better or worse. We can do whatever we want, in some sense, compared to pre-modern culture. We don't exactly know what to do with our we don't know what to be determined about particularly. It doesn't involve just craving and clinging. So, but anyway, but anyway, strange path all alone. Okay, we have no memory of our previous death. That's why in the Vajrayana, just to insert another Vajrayana, this in the three samadhis, the samadhi of suchness, this first samadhi of suchness, is an antidote to not remembering our previous death. So basically, that's not here. The point of this is, why make so much of all my friends and foes? Basically, whoever harmed me or whoever helped me, it doesn't matter now. Doesn't really matter now. All I've got is my karma. How I was with all that. My friends aren't going to help me and nobody can hurt me. It's just me and my karma, or maybe not even me, just karma being experienced. So, 62, how instead can I make sure to rid myself of evil, only cause of sorrow? So this evil is basically the sum total of all my acts of attachment, aversion, and stupidity. How can I rid myself of that accumulation? Only cause of sorrow. It's my friends my friends can't hurt me. My enemies can't hurt me. My friends won't be able to help me. It's just my karma. So how can I make sure to rid myself of it? Is through the practice now of confessing, through the four strengths, distancing, purifying, uprooting the causes and the eventual effects of negative actions, and practicing virtue, especially virtue, as Dharma people, and Mahayana is to practice virtue with kindness and compassion and love and joy and equanimity as an aspiration, as a motivating aspiration of virtue. That's even better. This should be my one concern, my only thought, both night and day. So basically, it's how to confess that's what he's saying is, I should think about confessing. Like we lay awake at night, worrying about the world, about relationships, about this one and that one, how to say this to this person tomorrow, how to do this job tomorrow. We worry about all of those things. What he's saying is here, the real thing, those things won't endure. The real thing we ought to worry about is, how can I confess? How can I put into practice what I've learned of the Dharma? What virtue can I do in my dreams tonight? What virtue can I do when I wake up tomorrow? I need to take refuge. I need to develop faith in karma, basically, I think. Become certain about karma. They say we must have that, because that's really the basis for purification, is understanding impermanence and karma. They say having faith in karma is the perfect view of an ordinary person. Ordinary person meaning a worldly person. That's the best possible view that a worldly person can have, is the view of karma, having confidence in the truth of karma. So then actions are, so then our actions then, if we're obsessed and we think about how to purify karma during the day, and we lay awake at night thinking about how to purify karma, then the result of that familiarity, let's say, is that everything, all your actions will be in the category of the strength of the remedy, of the applied antidote to karma, to your negative karma. That's how the mechanics of that way of thinking, that's how what it leads to, is that your actions will automatically or more naturally become purificatory. The wrongs that I have done through ignorance, stupidity, all actions evil by their nature and transgressions of the precepts, fearing all the pains to come, I join my palms and ceaselessly prostrate, and everything I will confess directly in the sight of my protectors. So through the wrongs that I did, through ignorance, stupidity, we've been kind of foolish, careless, kind of took on we were kind of vague. We had vague ideas about what we should do or what's right and wrong, all those things then that we've done, that I've done, then all actions that are evil by their nature, that is to say, there's certain actions, these are talking about two different kinds of conduct. One that are naturally negative, that naturally produce negative results, that fall into the category of the 10 types of physical, verbal, and mental actions: killing, stealing, sexual abuse, misconduct, lying, slander or divisiveness, aggressive, abusive speech, and gossip, and envy, hatred, antipathy is called, and wrong views, a lack of belief, a denial of, say, causation, karma, and other things. So these are just by their nature produce negative actions. And of course, the intensity of those actions is driven by, or is determined, so to speak, by the motivation behind them and how they're carried out. But they're just naturally, they produce results that are on the suffering side of experience. And then there's those that are only negative because of the precepts that you've taken to uphold those actions, such as not eating. If you take vows, basically, then here he's talking about to take on the precepts or the vows and commitments of the Vinaya ordination, where you have all sorts of things like monks and nuns, like not supposed to eat after noon. And so for a monk or a nun to eat in the afternoon, then they incur, that's a negative act. For an ordinary person who eating in the afternoon is not a negative act. So then it's the transgressions of the precepts. It's done by someone who vows. They're not supposed to, say, handle money. Full monks, they don't touch money or gold, or not cut grass, or not hit trees with sticks and things like that. So all these things, how you treat your robes and things like that, these are all only negative because of your vows. So there's these two. So we need to confess those. I join my palms and ceaselessly prostrate. And so here, what he's teaching us is how to confess by envisioning that you are in the presence of the three jewels, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, particularly your chosen deity, your root gurus, your lineage masters, that you are there and you are praying to be purified with the power of regret, the power of reliance, and the power of the remedy, which is your feelings. And then he says here, and you can think, like when we meditate, you just dream up, imagine, pretend, what do we say? Yeah, imagine that you're in the presence of the Buddhas. It's good to do that. It becomes a foundation. It becomes a powerful practice. For all we know, the Buddhas are always there, and we just aren't looking. And from the Dharma point of view, that's what is taught. Like they're always looking, whether we are aware of them looking or not. Buddhas are always, their compassion is always directed towards us. So if we want to feel that, we should feel that way. And then think that the Buddhas are living presence and confess. And through the compassion of the Buddhas, we can feel that their compassion takes the form of radiance, of light radiating, and that light, the warmth and the coloring and the presence of that light just goes right into our mind, our heart, our body, our lungs, our breath, our nervous system, all aspects of what we think of as our entire being become permeated by the power and compassion of those who we are envisioning in front of us and confessing to. And we should definitely gain confidence and feel that our karma is purified, that the results of that strength of practice is that we are free of the negative effects of the suffering effects of our negative actions. It's important to include that piece in our practice. And if we're Vajrayana practitioners and we're using a method such as a Vajrasattva and experiencing the radiance and the nectar coming and cooling and purifying away our body, we should feel at the end of that Vajrasattva is assuring us that all of our karma has been purified away, refined away, and we are now free of our karma. We should assert that practice. And 65, I pray you, guides and guardians of the world, take me as I am, a sinful man, and all these actions, evil as they are, I promise I will never do again. So we should acknowledge, declare our faults as if Buddhas were asking us about them. Like when we go to bed at night, like Rinpoche always taught, how when we go to bed at night, we should think back on the day of all the things all of our conduct, where we withheld, where we decided to be self-clinging. We didn't, we weren't friendly, we weren't generous, we weren't disciplined, all these things, what we said, that we shout, do we abuse, do we deceive, protect ourselves, protect our job, our position, what, all these things, we should think back and confess before we go to bed, and then have the radiance purify our karma, feel purified. And a way to do that also is to feel as though your guru or the Buddhas are in front of you, your yidam is in front of you, and they ask you, what did you do today that was negative? Try that. How was your day? All the negative things, tell me right now. Tell me what all your negative things were, and I'll purify. If you tell me, I'll purify them, and you will become purified of them. But you have to tell me. And I know what they are. But you have to still tell me. Because without that peace, there's, self-clinging is there. Our agenda is still operating. And also, what was your virtue? What virtue did you do today? We'll dedicate it together. Your virtue, I'll take your virtue and I'll dedicate it for you even. I think like that. So that way. And so then this last two lines here, it says, in all these actions, evil as they are, I promise I will never do again. So this is the fourth strength, the strength of our resolve, our resolution to no longer indulge in negative actions, to commit yourself to not repeat your sins, your unskillful or your neurotic or your negative actions, whatever you want to call them. And you think that as you are receiving the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and purifying your karma, that as your karma is purified, you make a resolution in that process. You resolve not to repeat your negative actions as you are being cleansed and purified of your faults and breaches and your vows. Okay. So that takes us to the end of that chapter. So, closing prayers, dedication, and aspiration. The first three are dedications. The last two are aspirations. Dedication has to do with the virtue done in the past, both tonight, listening, sitting, listening, and then aspirations, and before, all the virtue of 3 times actually, and all the virtue you'll ever do in the future. You dedicate it, and then aspiration has to do with setting in motion your future virtue. Okay, let's just pause and reflect on dedicating and aspirations. All the virtue of this practice and all that is gathered throughout the 3 times, I dedicate to all beings without exception, so that they may attain Buddhahood. Following and emulating the omniscient and courageous Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra, I completely dedicate all virtue. Since dedicating merit is praised as supreme by victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate these roots of virtue for the sake of practicing excellent conduct. May the teachings of Lord Buddha, the only source of benefit and happiness, long remain in this world. May the lives of those who uphold these teachings be as stable as a victory banner. Supreme Bodhicitta is so very precious. Where it has not yet arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline. but evermore grow and flourish. Okay, so then, since we're studying this and you're hearing these teachings, then read what you've heard about, and then go forward. Read as much of this text as you can. Certainly read the first chapter and the second chapter, and try to, see. I don't know whether you're taking notes or you have a extraordinary memory, or you have recourse to the playback, to the videos that are here below or somewhere for this. But really try to a lot of the verses here are not so easy to appreciate. We think we can understand them, but then have kind of a so-so attitude. But really, we should. That's like Patrul Rinpoche taught this text like 100 times, and people received it 100 times. And so made these verses come to life in their own mind by learning through studying them, repeating them, contemplating them, learning how to actually integrate or meditate on them. And of course, answering or asking questions about it. Like, this makes no sense. This is too obvious. It can't be that meaningful. That kind of, ask questions to see how we can tease out each one of these verses so that each one stands on its own and is meaningful as a source of meditation. Patrul Rinpoche used to just teach for a few minutes a day to his Dzogchen practitioners. They just talk about, or he'd teach them maybe 1-2 verses, and then they'd go off for a couple of days and contemplate that. And they were Dzogchen practitioners. So there's something underneath the words here that we should try to dig out. And so if maybe next time, if you have questions, you can ask questions or send me questions that I can use to see. I mean, I don't know that much about these texts myself. I'm just using the commentary and learning myself about it. But we can maybe clarify some doubts that you might have. Okay, then this the third chapter coming up is the last of the chapters that concern Supreme Bodhicitta is so very precious, whereas not yet arisen may it arise. These 3 chapters are commentaries on how to give rise to bodhicitta where it has not yet arisen, that is to say, in your mind. And so we'll continue on the discussion of the 7 practices, 7 or 8 or 10 practices that make up the mind that gives rise to bodhicitta. Joy. Next week, joy. We can feel joyful next time. We'll talk about joy and things like that. Okay. Okay.